October 2019, the Dutch farmers started off. So I think it's important to go back there and chat about that situation a little bit. So, can you speak specifically to the Dutch farmers and why they started protesting?
This all relates to soil fertility in the first place. You know, depending on the soil fertility of each European country, you have a fairly high or low fertilizer use. And the fertilizer use in the Netherlands is fairly high compared to the European average. And that, of course, brings an emissions burden that the Dutch government wanted to address. So, according to EU policy, each member state has to do its part in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's not just carbon dioxide, that's also methane, and that's also nitrous oxide, which is one of the effects of the use of fertilizers. And the Dutch government came to a point where it only had essentially the choice between stopping all construction in the country, which wasn't an option, or stopping all aviation. It's a significant connecting airport, Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, or significantly reducing the amount of livestock farmers, because the Dutch government said, look, I mean, we are also an export market. Do we really need to be an export market for instance, Dutch cheese? And so it looked at how many farmers would have to stop their profession for us to get closer to the number we're looking for. And ultimately, the plan would have meant that until 2030, the Netherlands would have gotten rid of about 30% of its livestock farming business. And that meant that a lot of farmers would have to not be able to continue. And the way it tried to achieve that upset a lot of farmers, because it said initially, we're going to buy you out. So we're going to pay you out of your profession to stop your profession. We're going to reimburse you for the costs. Now, some farmers were actually interested by this because they wanted to get out of the profession anyway, but that was a tiny fraction compared to the amount of farmers that said, no, we're not interested. This is a family business. This is rooted in our tradition for centuries. We don't want to give this up. And then I think the really the key point where the protests really started to become fairly, I mean, I don't want to say aggressive, but definitely very loud, was when a minister suggested that maybe this land buyback program might not be voluntary. It might become compulsory, and the government might just say your farm has been confiscated and here's the money to compensate you for it, but it's not an option for you anymore. And that, of course, that drove the farmers to the street in a fashion that the Netherlands has really rarely seen. We've had farmer protests in Europe before, but really never on this scale.
Wow. That's unbelievable. And to think about that it wouldn't be voluntary. One, the fact that it was being suggested. Two, it wouldn't be voluntary. That just seems so at odds to the free countries that we live in. And so many of those farms being multi generation. I can see why they were a little bit upset about that, right?
Oh,
Oh,
certainly,
wow.
certainly. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's. I mean, farming is deep rooted in many European countries. I mean, if you the average farm in Europe is also significantly smaller than it would be in the United States or in Canada. That a lot of this tradition, it's the way you produce. It's also the fact that a lot of Europeans have been for a very long time going to their farmers to buy directly from farmers. So there's this deep rooted tradition and understanding of the value of farming. And again, just like in Germany, what we've seen is that the citizens in the Netherlands have sympathized with the farmers. And we had more than just polling, we had a pretty good test, because in early 2023, there were provincial elections in the Netherlands. And the largest amount of seats went to a farmers' party that previously was just a very small party. And suddenly there was no way around farmers in order to pass this piece of legislation. Right now, the Dutch government is in a bit of disarray because it stepped down. Then there were new elections, and they haven't been able to build a coalition ever since. It's been a while. But a Farmers' Party might even be part of the next government coalition, which means that no way goes past farmers in order to pass new environmental regulations. So significant setback. I mean, it's like a lot of people had to resign over this, and you can see there's real political repercussions if you mess with the farmers.